worldwide and here in Washington, D.C., to defend not only the rights of the Baha'is of Iran as the largest religious minority in that country, but I've worked on the religious rights of all people and on particularly the advancement of women and the rights of women around the world. I am a Baha'i and I have always cared about humanity and about the eventual, and I believe this with all my heart, establishment of world peace. And I believe that it's not possible for peace to be established unless we have greater understanding among the world's religions and dialogue and peace among people of faith and people who are not of any faith. And we also have to work for the advancement of women and the equality of women in order to have peace. I think one of the most important dimensions is one's personal integrity. Most activists believe very strongly in whatever it is that they are advocating. And whether one is in the religious freedom arena or political arena, however one defines it, it's important to have principles and to be true to those principles. One could even define it in a religious way or a spiritual way. But I have found that in this time where there is tremendous extreme rhetoric on many sides, that knowing what one believes and being true to that can be among the most important qualities. The goal immediately has been to stop the persecution of the Baha'is in Iran, to be able to help those whose lives are threatened, to release from prison those who are in prison. The long-term goal is that the Baha'i faith in Iran, as the largest religious minority in that country, would eventually be able to have full rights as a religious minority to participate in society without fear of persecution and without obstruction. That children could go to school without harassment, people could go to university, that it would be possible no longer to be fearful of being put in jail overnight, full freedom for the religious minority. When the Islamic Republic was established 30 years ago, the persecution of the Iranian Baha'is began in a more concentrated and more dramatic fashion, even though it had existed even during the time of the Shah. And very few governments knew about the Baha'is 30 years ago. So one objective, of course, was to let the world know that the religious minority in Iran existed, and also at that point then to use the various levers that governments have and the United Nations in order to let the government of Iran know that its treatment of this religious minority was condemned by other governments in the world. And so in the United States, for example, there have been 11 congressional resolutions. There have been numerous statements made by presidents of the United States since the time of President Reagan back in the early 1980s, also by the State Department and most recently by Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. And at the United Nations there have been resolutions that have mentioned the Baha'is, and those resolutions that have condemned human rights violations by the government of Iran since 1985, and every time that there is either a Human Rights Commission or now a Human Rights Council meeting that deals with human rights in Iran, the Baha'i case is mentioned. And so it's by using these various means, national governments and international mechanisms are able to themselves receive information, investigate, and then to call on Iran to uphold the human rights of its citizens. That's a broad question, so let me start narrowly by talking about the United States example. One, because it has been 30 years since the Islamic Republic came into existence, from the United States perspective, of course, we have had the chance to work with Republican and Democratic administrations. I referred earlier to principles that one adheres to. And one principle about human rights is that it is absolutely not a partisan issue. It doesn't matter whether one is Republican or Democrat from America, or whether one belongs to the Christian Democrats or the Socialist Party of another country. Human rights are universal and they transcend political parties. And so for governments, whether Australia or Germany or Norway or Chile or Bolivia, it doesn't matter what parties, it is of concern that the human rights of the citizens of Iran are not being upheld. And that's what the Baha'is have done, to work with their governments, their local parliamentarians, in order to have the citizens of countries that may have very little relationship with Iran, but the Baha'is of those countries and others who care about human rights do care about what happens to people in other parts of the world, and they raise the issue above any partisan matter. You know, I have never been able to work directly with the Baha'is of Iran because they are not able to have that kind of direct communication. They are as a persecuted minority. We belong to the same religion. Whether I was a Muslim here in the United States who wanted to connect to Muslims in Iran, or if I was of Christian or Jewish background and wanted to connect to the Christians and Jews of Iran, we share our belief in God and in the world. But the Baha'is have not been able easily to live their religion in Iran. The leadership is in jail right now, has just been handed down onerous prison terms simply because they are Baha'is. And the government has made every effort to disrupt and in fact destroy whatever kind of communication and whatever kind of informal organization the Baha'is have been able to have. And so information does come out from family members, it does come out by the Baha'is themselves, thanks to the technological revolution that's taken place in the last decades. And Baha'is make every effort to double-check and triple-check the information before we share it with governments to make sure it's not just rumor or hearsay. And that's a very challenging aspect for any human rights defenders, any people who work in this field, is to make sure that what we are providing to governments and to the United Nations is credible and accurate information. It would be leaders of thought, which would include government, people who and agencies that are in a position to be able to affect positively the behavior of the Islamic Republic of Iran towards its citizens, who the Baha'is who are being persecuted. That would be the main audience. Although, interestingly, because of the technological revolution and social media particularly, Facebook is so popular in Iran, so is Twitter. All these avenues are ways for people to communicate with each other directly and to learn the truth about things. And so in terms of advocacy and activism, the goal has always been to ameliorate, to make sure that things improve for whoever the persecuted group is. But in broader terms, of course, there is also a connection, a dialogue, a human connection established by using the means at our disposal, from the telephone all the way to Twitter.